At the heart of this story lies the night when Ben, a broken writer, hands Emily the manuscript he could never finish. For her, every word feels like both a goodbye and a beginning, stirring memories of the husband she lost and the love she never thought she could feel again. The moment forces them to confront whether their connection is healing or just another wound. Shadows of guilt and fear battle against the fragile spark of hope they've built together. What happens next will decide if two broken souls can truly write a new chapter of love. Ben sat by the window of his small apartment, staring at the half-written pages of a story he could not finish. His words had once flowed like a river, but after his girlfriend walked out of his life, every sentence felt like a wound. Nights stretched into mornings and still he sat, drowning in the emptiness of rejection. One evening, his friend dragged him to a local book club, telling him he needed real people, not just paper ones. Ben didn't want to go, but something inside whispered he should. The room smelled of coffee and old paper. People laughed, their voices rising and falling like music, but Ben felt out of place. Then he saw her, Emily. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't pretending. She sat quietly, her eyes carrying the weight of untold stories. Ben didn't know why, but he felt pulled toward her. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled with sadness, yet there was strength inside it. She spoke about grief and love as if they were twins. For the first time in months, Ben felt words stir within him again. Emily was a widow. Her husband, Mark, had been gone for almost 2 years, but his presence still followed her like a shadow. She had joined the book club because silence in her house had become too loud. People often looked at her with pity, but she hated pity. Tonight, though, something different happened. She noticed the man sitting across the room, his eyes tired but searching. He wasn't staring at her with pity, he was staring with recognition, as if he knew what it felt like to lose. When the meeting ended, Ben walked toward her. His steps were unsure, but his voice was steady when he said, "I liked what you said about grief." Emily raised her eyes, surprised by the honesty in his tone. They spoke for a while, their conversation stumbling like children learning to walk. Yet beneath every pause, there was an invisible thread pulling them closer. That night, when Emily got home, she couldn't stop thinking about Ben's eyes, the way they carried sorrow, but also the faintest flicker of hope. Weeks passed. Ben and Emily started sitting together at the book club, then meeting outside it. They talked about stories, about love, about pain. Ben told her about his heartbreak, how betrayal had broken his spirit. Emily told him about Mark, how love had once filled her life until death stole it away. Their honesty became their bond. Still, beneath their laughter there was fear. Could broken hearts really find love again, or were they just clinging to each other's wounds? One evening, Ben showed Emily the manuscript he hadn't been able to finish. "It's about a man who stops writing after love leaves him," he confessed. Emily read the pages, her fingers trembling as if holding something fragile. "Maybe," she whispered, "the story isn't about him being abandoned. Maybe it's about him learning to write again." Her words struck Ben like thunder. For the first time in months, he opened his laptop and began to type. Not alone, but with Emily beside him, suggesting, shaping, breathing life into each sentence. But love is never simple. The closer they grew, the more Emily's fears screamed. At night, she dreamt of her late husband's face as if he was asking, "Have you forgotten me?" Guilt clung to her like chains. Sometimes, when Ben reached for her hand, she pulled back, not because she didn't want him, but because she was afraid of betraying the man she once loved. Ben too struggled. What if Emily was only leaning on him as a crutch? What if he wasn't enough to heal her? Doubt gnawed at both of them, and silence began to creep in where laughter once lived. One night, after an argument that ended with Emily leaving in tears, Ben sat alone with the unfinished manuscript again. He felt the familiar emptiness return, but this time he couldn't give in. He took a deep breath and wrote, "Asterisk, love doesn't erase the past. It carries it. But in carrying it together, two people can walk lighter." Asterisk. The next morning, Ben printed the pages and slipped them into an envelope. He left it at Emily's doorstep with a single note. Asterisk, "This is not just my story anymore. It's ours." Asterisk. Emily read it with tears rolling down her cheeks. For the first time, she didn't feel like moving on meant forgetting Mark. She felt like her heart had space for both the memory of the man she lost and the man who had found her. That evening, she went to Ben's apartment. When he opened the door, she didn't speak. She simply placed her hand in his, not pulling away this time. Together, they sat down at his desk, the manuscript open before them. The words were no longer broken. They were writing a new chapter, not just on paper but in their hearts. And in that silence filled with love, Ben and Emily finally began.